Hello everyone, Mike with Spray Jones, and I have to address a lot of requests that I've gotten to answer a question on something that's called flash and fill or flash and bat, and that's where you take a requisite amount of foam. It could be an inch, could be two. You spray foam it into the walls or into a roof structure, whether it be to the deck of the roof or to the floor of the attic, and then you're going to make up the rest of your insulation value with blow-in cellulose fiberglass batting. I've had to do a lot of soul searching on this. I have a very strong opinion on this, and I have to back it up with some facts, but I'm trying to choose my words carefully because there are a lot of fiberglass and spray foam companies out there that advocate for this. And there's a lot of good foam companies that advocate for this. And I'm going to try to be as kind as I can, because if you have taken the red pill in life and seen just how poor fiberglass is, it has moisture problems, it has settling issues. The only thing it's got going for it is that it's dirt cheap. If you have had that red pill moment where you see just how inferior fiberglass is, it's impossible to go back to engrafting and using any amount of it for any reason. Now, I understand that people have budgets and that not everybody can afford to spray foam the whole entire house or the whole entire structure. But when we start to get into these hybridized systems where we're going to use a little bit of this and a little bit of that, we are setting ourselves up for huge problems, and we're going to get into that and show you exactly why. Okay, issue number one, and this image is taken from a Government of Canada website. Depth and accuracy. So this shows a top view of a foundation, but we can use it for foundation, for an outside wall on a house or a commercial building. But in this situation, they're always showing the studs and the foam as fairly controlled. This is not real world. I am speaking from experience. You are going to have odd stud bays. Some are 16 on center, 24 on center. Some are only going to be 4 inches wide. Some are going to be 10 inches wide. Framing changes dimensions based on where windows are located, and blocking has to be put. We all know this. You are not going to be able to get an inch of foam or 2 inches of foam perfectly smooth to allow for the depth of bat. We had a house that we were working on. There were supposed to be 4 more houses. They were condominiums, actually, condominium units. They wanted to do flash and fill. They barely made it through the first one before they nixed it for the rest of them. The reason being, we were trying to be as accurate as we can. Some bays are going to be overfilled, some are going to be under, and you are going to have a difficult time getting the batting in and having it not stick out past the drywall. These show perfect situations where the foam is exactly 2 inches or just a little bit around 2 inches. No. Wait until the foam is 3 and 4 inches thick because you gave one little squirt and it filled the cavity up. Now what are you going to do? Shave it back? Leave a problem for the next person? Or spend more time? And trust me, anybody coming in after you where the foam has bellied out at the bottom, bellied out at the sides, it's curling up the wall, it's not a perfect smooth application, so you're going to have issues with putting the batting in next. And if you are not accurate on getting everything detailed out and sealed, that's going to lead you to issue number 2. Issue number 2, air leakage. Why are we wanting to use spray foam in the first place and not just bat the thing? I mean, come on, if bats really work and are really great and they're inexpensive, there's no reason to switch, right? There's no reason to switch. We're having this conversation about air leakage, air infiltration and exfiltration. So, the spray foam, 1 inch thick or 2 inch thick, is supposed to provide this great insulation air seal. Well, does it? Do you get into the corners? Can you get the corners filled up? Can you get the edges filled up? Are you going to be able to use only 1 inch of material? And I'm picking on 1 inch because I hear this all the time. Well, let's just do 1 inch and then do the rest of it with bat. So let's just look at the practicality of that. Can you get 1 inch of foam into the corners, into the edges, and not have gaps or low spots or areas that you've missed. If you think that you can, you're welcome to try. But sometimes you know full well, if you are in the spray foam industry, you need to be honest, you need 2 and 3 inches of foam sometimes to get a detail sealed, because that's how thick you have to build up the foam to transition it out of a tight corner or an edge or over a transition from a floor joist area over the top of a foundation. So now you've built this up 2 and 3 or maybe even more inches thick. How are you going to, and with closed cell, how are you going to get the batting in there? And your foam is going to be lumpy, bumpy, and thick in areas. So you're back to problem number 1, which is depth and control. But issue number 2 is, did you get enough to actually be the air seal and control air leakage? And then you're going to have to caulk all the seams still. Okay, you have got to stop the air from coming through. You have to, not just in the stud bay, but all the areas where you cannot put spray foam to. So all the seams where wood meets wood, or an outside or transition of 2 dissimilar materials, that all has to be caulked and air sealed. Because if you do not get it sealed perfectly, we now go into problem number 3. Okay, the bat is going to hold the moisture. You know this because one of fiberglass's best qualities is the ability to allow air and water to go through it and to hold and to trap that. And once you have got a bat wet, that's it. It's game over. You have got to get it out of the wall. You've got to get air flowing through it. You got to get heat at it to dry it back out generally. There are a few instances of minor moisture contamination that sunlight on it will dry it back out, but that's rare. The issue is that if you have not sealed it with the 1 inch or the 2 inches of foam, if you haven't sealed it with the caulking, you are then going to have moisture coming through the wall in the form of air leakage that can become trapped inside the wall assembly between 2 layers, which is the spray foam and the polyethylene vapor barrier. And that raises a whole nother issue. It's kind of a sub point on point 3. Where are you going to put this vapor barrier? Where's the location? Should there be one? Shouldn't there be one? Because isn't the spray foam acting as a vapor barrier? So is an internal vapor barrier redundant? What does the code have to say about it? That's actually point number 4. But let's just look at the moisture trap issue. Do you want to deal with this? Because if it's 100% spray foam, any moisture will show up right away because we're not using a poly vapor barrier. You're going to know it on the drywall. You're going to be able to open it up. You're going to be able to address it, fix it, find out where the air leakage is, add more foam, add more caulking, and the spray foam is not going to be compromised. You're not going to have a wicking effect through it, and you're going to have very localized damage, if anything, okay? With a fiberglass system, which is 100% fiberglass, if there is moisture penetration, it's going to be localized to the bays that have been compromised. You have the ability to dry it back out potentially with sunlight. I mean, I'm having a difficult time defending the fiberglass way as being honorable, but when you hybridize it, when you have so much foam on the inside and a polyethylene vapor barrier, you have trapped it. You've bagged it. So you in essence can have your own very own little Chernobyl in your walls. You can have a runaway effect that you can't stop. And what are you going to do about it? You avoid it altogether. You don't do it, because that's going to lead us to point number 4, and that is my favorite topic. What do the rules have to say? There is a rule in the National Building Code of Canada, and if you're in the United States, you're going to have similar regulations for your county, your state, on how much inboard to outboard insulation you can have in a ratio. So to put this into layman's terms, and I'm just showing you here an excerpt from the appendix of our National Building Code. You cannot have too much of your insulation value close to the outside versus to the inside, especially when it's low permeance. So you cannot be putting a low permeance insulation close to the outside and start shifting and moving the dew point in the wall assembly. So a general rule of thumb, is to go to a chart similar to this at the bottom here and calculate out what we always called the 1/3, 2/3 rule, so that you could not have your dew point any greater than towards 1/3 out of the wall. If you were to the 1/3 versus 2/3 inside, 2/3 inside, you're safe. You haven't allowed enough moisture to get through the wall assembly to form moisture within the wall and cause a condensation problem. But to 1/3 outside the wall, you've cooled it down sufficiently to where moisture can build up, and you can have a constant, never-ending moisture problem when you have the right heat flow equation, meaning it's cold enough outside, warm enough inside. So when you are dealing with this, do you put on 1/2 inch? Do you put on 1 inch? Do you put on 2 inches of foam? You are shifting the dew point assembly in the wall. Obviously, if you go with 2 or 3 inches of spray foam, you've removed the dew point. There's not a problem. You're not having a moisture problem, but at that point, 2 or 3 or 4 inches of foam, you're paying for spray foam. You got no more room to put fiberglass. Why are you even having this discussion? This only becomes an issue when you get down into this 1 inch area. If you have 1 inch, do you have sufficiency to be a vapor barrier, or are you causing other problems? And are you going to run into it with a code issue? So you start dabbling with this dew point line, having enough insulation to remove moisture, having enough insulation to do its job, and you're just reintroducing a problem. I already addressed the fact of when you are trying to spray down onto drywall that this is a fool's errand in the video, spraying down onto drywall. So when it comes to flash and fill for an attic and you're going to use this in place of a vapor barrier, go watch that video, please. It's a fool's errand to go up inside there, try to spray down. That is the most expensive vapor barrier in your life you're ever going to pay for. 1 inch, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and you got all the problems that we go over in that video of trying to spray down and make it all work. So really, flash and fill for the attic, it's out, unless you've got a towering huge attic where there's boatloads of room to walk around in there. So this just becomes an issue of, are you going to do the walls this way? So let's close this off. Here's 4 things that we have established. 1, you're having an issue with depth and accuracy of getting the foam in, making it consistent so that 1, you have it sealed, 2, you've left enough space for the batting to go in. Second point, air leakage. If you are not successful, you're going to have air leakage within the wall assembly. You're going to have to do a very good job of caulking and getting everything sealed so that you don't lead into point number 3, which is if you have air leakage, if you have moisture buildup within the wall assembly, the bat is going to hold the moisture. It's a perfect breeding ground for mold and moisture rot against the studs, which leads you to point number 4, which is that the code forbids that you have inboard and outboard insulation dew points move too far in the wall assembly to have these types of issues. So if you start to look at it here, 1, 2, 3, 4, I've given you 4 major body blows as to why this system is flawed. It's flawed from an installation standpoint, it's flawed from an air leakage standpoint, it's flawed from a moisture holding the bat standpoint, and from a code standpoint. You have got 4 major chances to foul up royally on this and have major issues. So in closing, you either believe in the bats and go solely with that, or you believe in the spray foam and go solely with that. To hybridize the systems shows an imperfect understanding of how things are supposed to work and the inherent risks. And I have talked anybody that comes to my business out of doing this system. And usually after point number 1, they can see the daylight and they've taken the red pill and they're awake. And they say, yes, that makes perfect sense. So I know there's a lot of other videos out there on the internet. I know there's a lot of pictures of people doing this. I hope that this adds a little bit of clarity to it and you take it for granted that maybe, just maybe, you can draw on my experience and say this is something we should just avoid. And if you go fully with the foam, you're never going to look back and never going to regret it. And the only reason you entertain this is cost. So muscle it up, Pony up the cash and don't look back, because you get what you pay for in life. If you like the video, like it, subscribe to my channel, stay tuned, because we're trying to keep everybody educated as much as possible in the foam industry. And share some comments. Bye.